Listen to me very carefully. Right now, there's a colony ship floating in the darkness above Halcyon with 10,000 frozen corpses that were supposed to be the saviors of humanity. They've been drifting for 70 years. The corporation that controls the entire star system knows they're there. They've always known, and they're planning to dump them into space because keeping them frozen costs too much money. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that Earth, the cradle of all human civilization, has gone completely silent. No ships, no messages, nothing, for 3 years. And the people running Halcyon are about to commit the largest act of genocide in human history to cover it up. By the end of this video, you will know the complete story of the Outer Worlds. Every corporate conspiracy, every faction's rise and fall, every companion's tragic backstory, every marauder's origin, every murdered actress, and every failed experiment that broke people's minds. And I'm going to prove to you that the entire Halcyon colony was built on a lie so massive that when you understand it, you'll realize the villains might have been right all along. Here's what you're about to learn. The assassination that never happened that doomed the galaxy. The drug that created an entire race of psychotic killers. The twins who shared one identity until one was murdered. The information broker who heard every secret in the colony. The mother and daughter who fought over whether to mass-produce insanity, and the final choice that determines whether hundreds of thousands of people get frozen forever or wake up to save a dying world. Let's start with the lie they tell every child in Halcyon. In their history books, it says humanity reached the stars through the triumph of corporate innovation. That's what they want you to believe. The truth starts in 1901, in an alternate timeline where a single bullet never found its target. President William McKinley was supposed to die that year. In our world, he did. In the world of the Outer Worlds, he lived. And because he lived, Theodore Roosevelt never became president, never broke up the monopolies, never stopped the corporations from consuming everything. This is critical. Miss this, and nothing else makes sense. Without Roosevelt's intervention, corporations didn't just grow powerful. They replaced governments entirely. By the time humanity developed faster than light travel, there were no nations left, only companies, only brands, only the board of directors, a council of CEOs who carved up human space like a pie chart in a quarterly earnings report. One of their ventures was the Halcyon colony. A star system on the edge of known space, marketed as humanity's bold new frontier. The Halcyon Holdings Corporation, a merger of 10 megacorporations, funded 2 colony ships, the Groundbreaker and the Hope, each one carrying thousands of Earth's brightest minds in cryogenic suspension. Scientists, engineers, philosophers, artists. The best humanity had to offer, frozen in ice, dreaming of the world they'd build together. But here's where the story breaks. Here's where you realize something went catastrophically wrong before our story even begins. The Hope never made it to Halcyon, at least, not when it was supposed to. Its experimental skip drive, the engine that folds space to achieve faster than light travel, malfunctioned halfway through the journey. The ship dropped out of skip space light years from its destination. What should have been a 10-year journey became a 70-year drift through the void. Now pay attention, because this next part is where the conspiracy begins. When the Hope finally limped into Halcyon's orbit, decades late, the colonists were still frozen, still alive. But barely. You see, cryosleep was never meant to last that long. The human body starts to break down at the cellular level after extended suspension. The board's own scientist ran the numbers. Reviving the Hope colonist would cause what they clinically called explosive cell death. Their organs would literally liquefy from the inside out. So the board made a decision, a purely economic decision. They looked at the cost of researching a cure versus the value of 10,000 potential workers and decided it wasn't worth it. They declared the Hope lost in transit, filed the insurance claim, and left those 10,000 people floating in space, neither dead nor alive, while they built their colony without them. Everyone in Halcyon believes the Hope was destroyed. It's taught in schools, memorialized on plaques, a tragedy that reminds everyone how dangerous space travel can be. But one man knew the truth. Dr. Phineas Welles, a scientist who worked for the board until he discovered their lie. When he found out about the hope, something inside him snapped. He became obsessed with those frozen colonists. Spent 20 years in hiding, experimenting on corpses, developing a chemical cocktail that could safely revive someone after extended cryosleep. The board labeled him a terrorist, a mad scientist, Halcyon's most wanted criminal. They were right about one thing. He was mad. Mad enough to steal a ship, fly to the Hope, and attempt the impossible. After dozens of failed attempts that ended in puddles of liquefied human remains, he finally succeeded. He revived a single colonist. 1 person out of 10,000. That person is you. The stranger. The player. The wild card that's about to tear Halcyon apart. But Welles doesn't wake you up gently. He shoots you full of experimental chemicals that make time randomly slow down around you, dumps barely coherent explanations about saving the colony in your ear, and literally shoots you at a planet in an escape pod, telling you to find his contact, Captain Alex Hawthorne. Except your escape pod crushes Hawthorne into paste the moment you land. Your first act in this new world is accidental murder. Now you're alone on Terra 2, a planet that was supposed to be humanity's new Earth, but is actually a corporate wasteland filled with cannibals and monsters. Welles tells you to steal Hawthorne's identity and his ship. Just pretend to be him. Who's going to check? The real Hawthorne is currently a red smear under your landing pod. This is Edgewater, your first taste of Halcyon's reality. A company town owned by Spacer's Choice, whose corporate slogan is, "You've tried the best, now try the rest." That's not a joke. That's their actual motto. They literally advertise being worse than their competitors. The workers here are dying from malnutrition because the company processes alien creatures into a protein paste called saltuna that's slowly poisoning everyone who eats it. But they keep eating it because the company store doesn't sell anything else. And they keep working because if they stop, they lose their employee ID number. And without that number, they're not people anymore. They're just vagrants to be shot on sight. The town's leader, Reed Thompson, is the perfect corporate middle manager. He watches his workers die from plague and starvation, and his only concern is meeting quarterly quotas. But even he has a problem. He can't spreadsheet away. A group of deserters led by Adelaide McDevitt have escaped Edgewater and set up their own community at the botanical labs. They're growing actual food, real vegetables, and they're using power from a geothermal plant that Reed desperately needs. Here's your first real choice. Both communities need that power to survive. You can only give it to one. But Adelaide has a secret that makes this choice even darker. She's not just growing vegetables, she's using human corpses as fertilizer. Specifically, corpses from Edgewater Cemetery. She dug up the dead and turned them into plant food. When you ask her about it, she's completely unapologetic. Those corpses are just biomass going to waste. Why shouldn't they feed the living? If you give her the power, Edgewater collapses. The workers scatter. Some die. Some join Adelaide. Reed Thompson either kills himself or disappears into the wilderness. But Adelaide's community thrives on their diet of corpse vegetables. If you give Reed the power, Adelaide's deserters are forced to return to Edgewater or starve. Adelaide herself would rather die than go back. She vanishes, probably to die alone somewhere in the canyon. But here's the thing most players miss. There's a third option. If you dig deep enough, you discover that Adelaide actually knows how to cure the plague affecting Edgewater. She's been sitting on the cure this entire time, watching people die, because she wants Reed to fail. With the right words, you can convince Reed to step down and let Adelaide take over Edgewater. Everyone lives. The plague gets cured. It's the only ending where nobody has to die. But the game never tells you this option exists. This is where you meet Parvati Holcomb, the sweetest person in the entire colony and your first real companion. She's a genius engineer who's never left Edgewater, never questioned the company line, never imagined life could be different. When she sees your ship, sees the possibility of traveling the stars, something awakens in her. She begs to join your crew. Not for money or adventure, but because she wants to help people. She's the moral compass you didn't know you needed. You also meet Vicar Max, the town preacher who delivers sermons about the sanctity of corporate law. Except Max doesn't believe a word he's saying. He's a scholar trapped in a dead-end posting, forced to preach company propaganda when all he wants is to understand the nature of the universe. He's read every book in Edgewater twice. He's going insane from boredom and existential dread. When he finds out you have a ship, he offers you everything he owns to take him away from this place. With your new crew and a stolen ship called the Unreliable, you're ready to leave Terra 2. But the ship's AI, ADA, drops some disturbing news. She's been monitoring communications across Halcyon, and something is very wrong. Food shipments are failing. Supply lines are breaking down. The entire colony is starting to eat itself alive. And no one knows why. Dr. Welles contacts you with urgent instructions. He needs you to go to Monarch, a planet the board abandoned years ago because it was too dangerous to colonize. But you can't just fly there. The board has blockaded the planet. Anyone trying to land gets shot down by automated defense platforms. You need a nav key, a special navigation key that lets you bypass the blockade. And the only person selling one is on the Groundbreaker. The Groundbreaker is fascinating because it's the only place in Halcyon that isn't controlled by the board. It's the other colony ship, the one that actually made it on time. But instead of landing on a planet, the colonists turned it into a space station. A free port where smugglers, criminals, and anyone who refuses to bow to corporate authority can live. It's held together with duct tape and good intentions, constantly on the verge of falling apart, but it's free. This is where you meet Gladys Kokeli, the sweet grandmother who also happens to be Halcyon's most ruthless black market dealer. She has a nav key to Monarch, but she wants 10,000 bits for it. That's more money than most colonists see in a lifetime, unless you want to work for her. She needs someone to investigate a distress signal from a secret laboratory on Roseway, a terraforming station that's gone dark. But we need to talk about what you find in that lab because it's the first hint that something much darker is happening in Halcyon. The laboratory belongs to Auntie Cleo's, a corporation that makes consumer goods and processes food. They were developing 3 projects that would revolutionize the colony. The first was a new kind of artificial sweetener that was actually a powerful sedative. They wanted to drug the entire colony into compliance through their soft drinks. The second was a dietary supplement that would make people physically dependent on Auntie Cleo's products. Literal corporate addiction at the molecular level. The third was the worst. They were experimenting with mind control parasites. I need you to understand how insane this is. These aren't weapons, they're consumer products. Things that would be sold in stores, advertised on billboards, given to children. And the scientists working on them? They knew exactly what they were doing. Their research notes talk about acceptable casualty rates and target demographics for mental subjugation. You can choose to return this research to Gladys, who will sell it to the highest bidder. You can give it to the faction leaders who want it for their own purposes. Or you can destroy it all and condemn the scientists who created it. But here's the twisted part. If you destroy the research, those scientists get executed by their corporations for failing to deliver results. If you give them the research, they use it to poison more people. There's no good choice, just different flavors of evil. On the Groundbreaker, you also meet Ellie Fenhill, a medic who's running from something she won't talk about. She's cynical, sharp-tongued, and absolutely hates the board with a passion that seems personal. Later, you discover why. Her parents are board executives. She grew up in Byzantium, the luxury capital where the corporate elite live. She had everything handed to her on a silver platter, and she threw it all away because she couldn't stomach what her family did to maintain their wealth. Then there's Felix Millstone, a dock worker who talks like a revolutionary, but has never actually done anything revolutionary in his life. He approaches you in the loading bay with this whole speech about bringing down the system and fighting the power. When you ask him what he's actually done, he admits he's just been moving boxes and dreaming. But he's genuine. He really believes things can change. He just has no idea how hard that change will be. Now we need to talk about Monarch, because Monarch is where the story goes from corporate dystopia to absolute madness. This planet was supposed to be Halcyon's breadbasket. Perfect soil, perfect climate, everything you'd need to grow food for the entire colony. The board spent billions developing it, built entire cities, shipped thousands of workers. And then the creatures came. Monarch has these things called mantisaurs. Imagine a praying mantis the size of a building that can spit acid and turn invisible. Now imagine hundreds of them. The board tried everything. Military strikes, chemical weapons, even orbital bombardment. Nothing worked. The mantisaurs just kept coming. Eventually, the board did what corporations do best. They ran the numbers, decided Monarch wasn't profitable, and abandoned it. But they didn't evacuate the colonists first. They just pulled corporate support and imposed a blockade. Anyone on Monarch was on their own. No supplies, no communication, no hope of rescue. Most people died in the first year, but some survived. They adapted, and they split into two factions that hate each other almost as much as they hate the board. The first faction is Monarch Stellar Industries, MSI, led by Sanjar Nandi. Now Sanjar is different from every other corporate leader you meet. He actually cares about his workers. He tried to implement revolutionary policies like sick leave and bathroom breaks. The board's response? They revoked his corporate charter and left him to die with everyone else. But Sanjar still believes in the system. He thinks if he can just prove MSI is profitable, the board will take them back. He's created detailed business plans showing how Monarch could be saved. Comprehensive economic models. Sustainability reports. He thinks spreadsheets will save them while mantisaurs are literally eating his people alive. The second faction is the Iconoclasts, and they're the complete opposite. They're led by Graham Bryant, a former MSI worker who started a revolution after watching his friends get fed to the corporate machine. Graham preaches total rejection of corporate authority, burn the companies down, start over from scratch. Build a society based on human dignity, not profit margins. It sounds beautiful until you realize Graham is completely insane. Here's what most players never discover about Graham. Years ago, he led a group of workers in an uprising at Amber Heights. They were supposed to take control of the food supplies and distribute them equally. But Graham got the timing wrong, sent his people in during a shift change. The security forces were doubled. It was a massacre. Dozens of workers died, including children. And Graham's response? He blamed everyone but himself, said they were martyrs for the cause, started calling himself a prophet. His second in command, Zora Blackwood, knows the truth. She was there during the massacre, lost friends, almost died herself. But she stays with the Iconoclasts because she believes in the dream, even if she doesn't believe in Graham. She's constantly trying to restrain his worst impulses, keep him from getting more people killed. But Graham's getting worse, more paranoid, more violent. It's only a matter of time before he snaps completely. The conflict between MSI and the Iconoclasts has paralyzed Monarch. They're fighting over radio towers, supply depots, anything that might give them an edge. Meanwhile, the real threats, the mantisaurs and marauders, are growing stronger. And the marauders aren't just random bandits. We need to talk about what marauders actually are, because it's horrifying. Remember those corporations experimenting with performance-enhancing drugs? One of them, Spacer's Choice, created something called Adrena Time. It was supposed to help workers work longer shifts, stay alert for days without sleep, increase productivity by 300%. And it worked, for about a month. Then the side effects kicked in. Paranoia, violent outbursts, complete psychological breakdown. The test subjects started attacking each other, eating each other. They became the first marauders. But here's the truly evil part. Spacer's Choice knew about the side effects. They had extensive test data showing exactly what Adrena Time did to the human brain, and they shipped it anyway. Sold it in company stores across Halcyon, marketed it to workers who just wanted to make their quotas. Thousands of people took it. Thousands of people lost their minds. and Spacer's Choice covered it up, blamed it on a contaminated batch, paid off the families of victims, destroyed the evidence. Except they didn't destroy all of it. The production facility on Gorgon still exists. We'll come back to that, because what happens on Gorgon is going to make you question everything about corporate evil. But first, you need to understand what you're really doing on Monarch. Your mission is to reach Devil's Peak Station, the only radio tower powerful enough to contact someone off-world. Phineas Welles needs you to find an information broker named Hiram Blythe, who's been monitoring every communication in Halcyon. Hiram knows where to find the chemicals Welles needs to wake up the Hope colonists. But the radio tower is controlled by the Iconoclasts, and MSI is jamming their signals. You can't use it until one faction controls Monarch completely. This creates one of the most complex moral choices in the entire game. You can side with Sanjar and MSI, help them eliminate the Iconoclasts, and prove to the board that Monarch can be profitable. The Iconoclasts either die fighting or get absorbed back into corporate slavery. Monarch becomes a company planet again, with all the exploitation that entails. But people have food, medicine, and protection from the monsters. You can side with Graham and the Iconoclasts, help them destroy MSI, and create their anarchist utopia. Except it's not a utopia. Without MSI's infrastructure, people start starving immediately. The Iconoclasts don't know how to run water purification systems or maintain defensive walls. Monarch descends into chaos. Graham becomes a dictator, executing anyone who questions him. It's worse than corporate rule because at least corporations keep people alive to exploit them. But there's a third option that the game hides from you. If you investigate both factions thoroughly, you discover Graham's history with the Amber Heights massacre. You can expose him to Zora, who shoots him in the head and takes control of the Iconoclasts. Then, with the right persuasion, you can broker peace between Zora and Sanjar. They merge their factions, combining MSI's infrastructure with the Iconoclast's revolutionary spirit. It's the only way Monarch survives as something better than what it was. During all of this, you meet Nyoka Ramnarim Wentworth, possibly the most tragic companion in the game. She's a hunter, the best on Monarch, famous for killing mantisaurs with her bare hands. She's also a severe alcoholic, drinking herself to death as fast as she can. Her entire crew died on an expedition 2 years ago. They were mapping Monarch's underground caverns when they encountered something. Nyoka won't say what. She was the only survivor. Now she drinks to forget and fights to die, except she's too good at fighting to actually die. If you help her face her trauma, you learn the truth. Her crew didn't die from monsters. They died from corporate negligence. The board had been dumping toxic waste in those caverns for years. Her friends walked into a cloud of poison gas, died choking on their own blood while Nyoka watched from outside the contamination zone, unable to help. The board knew those caverns were toxic. They had warning signs printed. They just never bothered to put them up because it would have meant admitting they were poisoning Monarch. Once you resolve the faction war, you finally reach Devil's Peak Station. Hiram Blythe is exactly what you'd expect from someone who's been listening to every communication in Halcyon for years. He's completely paranoid, has 17 different locks on his door, talks to himself constantly. But he's also brilliant. He's pieced together patterns nobody else saw. He knows the board is lying about food production. He knows Earth has gone silent. He knows about the hope. And he knows where to find the chemicals. The chemicals are in Byzantium, the board's capital city, the shining jewel of Halcyon, where the ultra-wealthy live in obscene luxury while the rest of the colony starves. But you can't just walk into Byzantium. It's locked down tighter than a corporate earnings report. You need an official invitation or a board-approved identity, which means you need to steal one. This is where the game gets clever about class warfare. You can forge credentials claiming to be a famous actor, because Byzantium's elite are so disconnected from reality they've never actually met the people they claim to admire. You can murder a board official and take their identity because the guards care more about paperwork than people. Or you can get an official invitation by completing corporate contracts, literally selling your soul for a ticket to paradise. When you finally enter Byzantium, it's like stepping into another world. Pristine streets, fountains that spray actual water instead of industrial runoff, restaurants that serve real meat instead of processed protein paste. The citizens walk around in clothes that cost more than a worker's lifetime salary, complaining about how boring their lives are, how tedious the parties have become, how uninspired the latest fashion trends are. They have no idea the rest of the colony is dying. Or worse, they know and don't care. Your target is Minister Aloysius Clark, who supposedly has the chemicals. But when you track him down, you find him under house arrest in his own mansion. He's not the mastermind. He's a patsy. The real power in Byzantium is Adjutant Sophia Akande, Chairman Rockwell's second in command, and the architect of something called the Lifetime Employment Program. I need you to understand the magnitude of what you're about to learn. This isn't just corporate greed. This is genocide disguised as a benefits package. The board knows Halcyon is running out of food, the soil is dying, the crops are failing. Earth hasn't sent supplies in 3 years. By their calculations, the colony has maybe 5 years before total collapse. Their solution? Freeze everyone who isn't essential. The Lifetime Employment Program is mandatory cryogenic suspension for workers. They'll be put to sleep and only woken when they're needed. A few hours here, a few days there, stretched out over centuries. From the workers' perspective, they'll live a normal lifespan, but they'll experience it in fragments spread across hundreds of years while consuming almost no resources. The board calculated they can stretch Halcyon's remaining food supply for 200 years this way. Long enough for Earth to send help. If Earth still exists. But here's the truly evil part that made me stop playing the first time I discovered it. The board isn't going into suspension. Neither are the wealthy elite in Byzantium. They'll keep living normally, enjoying the remaining resources while 90% of the colony sleeps. They're creating a permanent underclass of frozen workers who only exist when the upper class needs something done. In Chairman Rockwell's office, you find his presentation video, the one meant to sell this atrocity to the public. He talks about it like it's a generous gift. Extended life, freedom from daily struggle, the chance to see the future. He actually smiles while describing how families will be separated across centuries. How children will wake up to find their parents aged or dead. How entire communities will be erased. And at the end, he says, the quiet part out loud. This is about preserving the board's power. Nothing else matters. The secret laboratory beneath Byzantium is even worse. This is where they've been testing the suspension process. The test subjects aren't volunteers. They're scientists who ask too many questions, engineers who try to find alternative solutions, anyone who might have opposed the plan. They're kept in suspension, woken periodically for experiments, then frozen again. Some have been conscious for less than a day over the past year. They're slowly going insane from the fragmented existence. You find the chemicals here, massive tanks of dimethyl sulfoxide. But there's a choice. You can take all of it for the Hope colonists, condemning the test subjects to death. Or you can leave some behind, saving the test subjects but potentially dooming some Hope colonists. The game doesn't tell you the exact numbers. You're playing God with incomplete information, just like the board. This is when Sophia Akande contacts you directly. She knows who you are. She knows you're working with Phineas Welles, and she makes you an offer. Turn Welles in and join the board. Help implement the Lifetime Employment Program. In exchange, you'll be one of the elite. You'll never want for anything. You'll live in Byzantium while the rest of the colony sleeps. You'll be complicit in genocide, but you'll be comfortable. If you refuse, she promises to hunt Welles down anyway. If you accept, you plant a tracking beacon in his lab. The board raids it immediately. Welles is captured and sent to Tartarus, the maximum security prison where the board sends people they want to disappear. Either way, the confrontation is coming. The only question is whose side you'll be on. But before we get to Tartarus, we need to talk about what happened on Gorgon because it explains everything about the Marauders. Gorgon was Spacer's Choice's secret research facility where they developed Adrena, time. The project was led by Dr. Olivia Ambrose, a brilliant scientist who genuinely believed she was helping workers. She thought Adrena, time, would let people work fewer hours for the same pay, give them more time with their families. She was naive enough to believe a corporation would use technology to help people instead of exploit them. They'd already invested too much to stop,